Welcome to NovoEDTalks, a podcast for authentic, honest conversations about talent development and the people shaping it. On this show, we sit down with leaders across learning and development, mentorship, leadership development, HR, and people strategy to talk about what's really working, what's changing, and what they're learning along the way. These aren't surface-level interviews. They're candid conversations about building skills, developing leaders, supporting managers, and creating experiences that actually move organizations forward. Before we jump in, a quick word about NovoEd. Founded at Stanford's Social Algorithms Lab in 2012, NovoEd is a people-centric talent development platform built for enterprises and training providers. Business transformation starts with people, and people perform better on NovoEd. In today's fast-changing landscape, upskilling requires a new approach. NovoEd makes it easy to move beyond the talent development status quo by combing social, collaborative, cohort-based learning with real-world application. The result is future-ready talent built on a platform designed to turn learning into measurable impact. Now, let's meet our guests for today's NovoEDTalks episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the NovoEDTalks podcast, a space for talent development trailblazers to get real. My name is Melissa Fisk. I'm the producer of the NovoEDTalks podcast, and today I am joined by Yulia Barnakova. Yulia is an AI innovation and learning advisor at Accenture. At Accenture, Yulia plays a dual role focused on AI implementation and learning innovation. She brings a strong consulting foundation to her work, helping organizations explore and embed AI in meaningful ways. She has worked on projects ranging from AI-powered search strategy and trip planning assistance to knowledge bots and conversational coaching tools, always with an eye toward how learning can support adoption and impact. A Microsoft Most Valuable Professional, MVP, since 2019, Yulia is also a TEDx speaker focused on making technology accessible and easy to learn for everyone. She writes the What the Tech column for Training Magazine, where she explores how emerging technologies can make work and learning more impactful. And she regularly explores AI tools with her kids, modeling a commitment to lifelong learning, both at home and at work. Yulia, it is such a pleasure to have you here on the NovoEDTalks podcast today. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to discuss today. So much happening that would be great to unpack.
Absolutely. Well, why don't we get right into it? And why don't you start by telling us a little bit more about your role, your company, and the work that you're focused on today?
Sure. Yeah. So as you mentioned, I kind of work at the intersection of AI innovation and learning, kind of the adoption piece of making AI, some of our AI adoption efforts stick. So right now, I'm leading a learning program for a major bank's board and C-suite, and then I've also worked on kind of the nitty gritty type co-pilot learning tutor type of experiences as well. So I kind of cross all segments, and then also kind of the technology, from the technology enabled learning to the white glove kind of in person type of learning as well. So love to discuss kind of everything across the spectrum today, and what I think that really the perspective that I bring is a lot of times I work in places where learning is it's part of the experience, but especially on the AI heavy sides, sometimes learning is sort of comes in after the work that we do to help with enablement and the adoption piece. So I'm happy to kind of broaden the aperture for everyone to kind of talk about experiences end to end, what I'm seeing across all kind of stakeholders that I work with.
Yeah, that'll be great because I think it is becoming just such AI is such a vast topic now, and how do we apply it and how are we using it in different ways and different aspects and different scopes, for every different role and everything. So there's no shortage of things we can get into today. But why don't you start a little bit more about kind of what drew you into this space in the first place?
Sure. Yeah. So I have always been kind of a learning geek and just love getting very deep into anything that I've been that that I'm interested in, and presenting things in very fun ways. So when I was younger, I actually kind of did kind of early tech stuff where I took my parents' camcorder and I made stop motion animation explainer videos with McDonald's Happy Meal toys. So for my assignments, I would oftentimes like, it's like you hit the button one position, hit the button another position, etc. Like what you see in a lot of the claymation type of movies and things like that. So I've always and that's an area that I like delved very deeply into, like just all the different angles and the video processing and all that kind of stuff. Like anything I do, I'm always like very obsessive with it. When as I was growing my career in consulting, and I love consulting because there's so many different things to learn about constantly, different industries, different topics, etc. What I found is that the intersection of consulting and technology is very powerful because you're having to learn even faster than just in the broader consulting space. And then when you add AI on top of that, then it's even faster that you have to learn because there's new, models, new features coming out every single day. And so it's kind of it kind of keeps my brain very much occupied to be in the AI space. And frankly, I always tell everybody that if you can intersect technology and especially AI with anything that you do, then you can really kind of outlearn your competition in the career space. So your trajectory could be much more accelerated. So it's just a very, very interesting space to be in and so important for just professional growth overall.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. I also hope you still have video footage of those clips of your McDonald's toys instructional videos. That's amazing. Talk about knowing, where you were going to go from a very early age. Um, Before we dive more into kind of the AI specifics, what's one trend in learning and development, maybe in learning and development with AI that you're paying most attention to right now?
Absolutely. So there's so many trends kind of on the horizon or that have been popping for a number of years, but I would say the number one trend we always talk about is the AI based learning. So like LLM based kind of learning tutors and coaches. So this is how we learn today as consumers, as people, right? Is like if we see something now instead of googling it, we'll kind of enter it into an AI tool, or if we want to learn more broadly about a subject, we kind of help it ask it to create a learning plan for us, or even like take a picture of something and then ask for an explanation. You can even turn on your video, right, with the chat gpt app, so which is, by the way, very underleveraged tool. Most people don't use the video option, but it's like literally having kind of that guide next to you, really in your life. And in the professional world, we're now kind of raising the expectations for that very personalized learning experience. So we've been talking about learning in the flow of work for many years, but now we can really turbocharge and amplify that pretty significantly with kind of almost like a one-on-one type of experience. It's still we're still working through all the technical details of making that happen, but that is the number one learning trend that I and many people on my team talk about because it is just so disruptive in terms of like the courses that we build, or if we build courses, right? The technology stack, the operating model of learning organizations, how we collaborate now across different stakeholders. So that is definitely the one I put out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, when you think about how quickly work is changing right now, how do you think about the relationship between evolving work and maybe the skills people need to kind of keep up with that?
Yeah, so I kind of think of it as kind of a loop type of process, and this is where it's really helpful for me to work on the AI and data side because that's where we usually get brought in to work with technology and business leaders to redefine different work processes. So as you know, if you all think about your kind of your work processes, how many of those are truly documented and fully mapped out? Very few that as we find it with many of our clients. So that's kind of the first step is just kind of mapping out where are the pain points in your current process, and let's map out all the steps and then figure out where AI and agentic capabilities can really play a role to improve that experience. So that's kind of the first part. Normally, that is done with business leaders, kind of who help map out the process, and then technology leaders who kind of help translate where AI and automation can play a role. So that is kind of a process in itself. And then from there, it's all about thinking, well, how does the work then change for the people involved? How do we elevate the roles, right, to essentially oversee the AI tools, which which roles could get redeployed, which roles would be kind of deprioritized, and then for the people kind of in this new process, how do we upskill them for the new versions of their role? So that's where learning starts to tie in with workforce transformation and technology and business leaders. So it's kind of a loop working together because the processes keep getting reshaped, right, as technology improves, and therefore, roles and skills need to get reshaped, and that's where learning and kind of the talent and all the transformation work that comes there comes into play.
Absolutely. I love the word you use right there, which is loop, right? Where that it is a loop and that we really need to think of it as like continuous, that we're constantly kind of evaluating this. But I think that's such a practical way to look at it, right? That I think so many people are struggling with right now to come up with and create, like because it is very difficult to think about, as things are rapidly changing, like how do we start applying this in practice? So I think that the model you just described there is something that people can really take and apply to their work and what they're doing with AI.
Yeah, I think for learning and talent leaders, the implication there is, try to get in earlier with into that process. So it's not like you're kind of coming in at a later stage in the loop, but really try to to work with your technology and business leaders even closer so that you're there helping shape out what those future roles look like and what the learning opportunities and the learning and skilling plans look like much earlier than kind of having all of that done on the front end and then having to come in on the tail end of it. So that's a piece that I'm always talking about is kind of getting in on that front end of the process as well.
Absolutely. Thinking about that, how has AI kind of reshaped that cycle in terms of how quickly it's moving? Like, how quickly is that adopt or is that evolving? And how do you suggest that people stay on top of that?
Yeah, that's a that's a that's an interesting one because there's so much meat behind that. You have in terms of kind of AI related skills and kind of stay on top of the market. That's something that's changing so quickly, and the way that we talk about skills needed is also changing quickly. So, for example, last year and kind of previous years, it was the term prompt engineering was really hot in the market, and it's like, "Oh, that's prompt engineers are becoming hot, etc." And now it's all about context engineering, so it's a little bit broader than just the prompt. It's kind of like how do you curate the knowledge and kind of the guardrails around what you're asking in order to get the result that you want. So, and agents, of course, i- they're starting to emerge in the enterprise environment, autonomous agents, I mean, but kind of the role of managing agents is certainly going to be one that pops up in the future as well. Not sure about the timeline because we're seeing kind of the consumer landscape move faster than the enterprise landscape, but certainly when enterprise can figure out all the guardrails with the security, et cetera, that's going to pop very fast. So I would say practically the key is just to stay on top of the market, understand um, kind of the different shifts happening, always, you know, play around with the different tools and technologies, but um, look specifically at what skills are hot today and how they're changing, because that's going to just help you have a more professional, like just deepen your professional kind of understanding of the market from a learning perspective.
Absolutely. And obviously, the time thing and how rapidly everything is advancing is going to be just a normal challenge that I don't think is going to go away and that we just are constantly trying to overcome. But where else, besides the time component there, where else do you see organizations getting stuck in kind of this cycle today?
Pretty much every every aspect of it, but I would say, just the, if we go back to the loop process that I mentioned, the understanding what the processes are today and kind of understanding them end to end, that's a big kind of, I would say, blocker or thing that slows organizations down because we have entire engagements helping organizations map out their processes. And then also, the processes are generally in different data silos across the organization, and it's also in the heads of their SMEs, right? The institutional knowledge of how does the process work in practice as well. So that is one big area. So, as you're thinking about your learning function, think about like how do you how can you better codify everything that you're doing so that you can start kind of bringing that reinvention process into even the learning space as well. We work with a lot of HR leaders on process reinvention, but less so on with learning leaders because that they're we find that that's still kind of an emerging area for them. But if if you want to kind of get ahead of it, start really mapping out those processes and figuring out how do you codify that institutional knowledge more in a way that can be kind of work in a way that you can use these tools to kind of accelerate your work as well. So that's one big piece. Another piece is just the going back to the data silos, just getting data on the learning front in particular. Like when you're building tools like the learning tutor or assistant, you have to pull content right from different like LMS systems, different places in the organization, and you know, a lot of like video content is not broken down or vectorized into pieces that can be read by a machine yet. So it's those kinds of things that I always recommend that if you want to start to work with kind of the frontier of learning innovation, start with making sure that your learning content can be accessed and it's tagged correctly, all of the and it's in a place that can be easily accessed because then you can start building out proof of concept and kind of build out and scale from there.
I absolutely love that. And you speak to something that I personally just like love to do, which is kind of getting organized, right? And that's it. I think I think that's so important though, with what with both of those things that you're talking about, right? It's almost a little bit counterintuitive where things are moving so rapidly. It's like, oh, I got to get on this, I got to figure it out. And it's like, no, you really need to take a beat and step back and map things out, make sure things are organized, sure things are tagged, and so that you can then kind of restructure and reevaluate and see where you can evolve things or add an AI component. So I really love that, and I think that's really solid advice for anyone in this space right now.
Yeah, I love that framing because it's kind of like it, a lot of these things are things that have been, it's things that organizations have wanted to do for a while anyway. I mean, getting your data house in order.
Yeah, on everyone's never. It's on that to do list that never gets done, right? It's always at
Exactly. Like, getting your data together, I mean, that's been, like, something we've been talking about for ages, right? Even before, kind of the big, explosion of AI tools, but now it's like the all of those things are critical, and even the collaboration, right? I mean, collaboration's not new, but now I call it kind of hyper collaboration, where it's like if you don't collaborate, you're not gonna be successful, you won't be able to realize the value of these new types of learning innovations coming out, so I love that point.
switching gears a little bit. We've been talking about, how we can conceptually kind of implement AI tools and processes or use AI to enhance. But, you've worked closely with a lot of AI tools, especially within the Microsoft ecosystem. Can you share a few practical ways that you're seeing AI support learning in the flow of work?
Sure. Yeah. Microsoft, of course, is super deeply entrenched in the in the enterprise ecosystem, and I feel like a lot, Copilot gets a lot of, mixed reactions sometimes. But what's great about Copilot actually, and especially if you have Copilot Agent Builder or Agent Light, kind of that feature enabled where you can kind of codify instructions and you can build kind of a mini agent, not autonomous, but one that can consistently use the same instructions that you can send to somebody. That's a really great place to start. So, I would encourage everybody if you have, Microsoft Copilot available, see if you have Agent Builder or Copilot Studio available, and then start experimenting with just small knowledge assistance on your teams because that's something that anyone can do, especially if Agent Builder is turned on in your organization. Because then you'll practice basically putting all of your files, kind of Melissa, to your point, organizing your current files in a way that can be retrieved by this Copilot agent, and it can just be, it doesn't have to be an enterprise agent that you send out to everyone, just for your team, right? And that kind of preserves the some of the security and guardrails that sometimes get in the way too. But and then see like if your team can start asking questions and accessing some of your content more easily, just from like a knowledge management perspective. And that's a way where you're playing around with knowledge assistance, and you're building that, you're seeing that content strategy play out in real time. Like maybe there's some documents where you have to actually, you'll find where it can't read diagrams, for example. So you might have to put some like alt text under the diagrams to kind of make it more machine readable. We're getting advances in that space, but still some, some issues with graphics, in particular. So, and that's going to start getting you that mindset, what I call the agentic mindset, because once you start thinking in that way, you'll start to apply that across many different areas of your work and life. And Microsoft is a great place to start there with Copilot.
Absolutely. And how are you seeing AI kind of changing the way learning is delivered? Whether that's personalization, real-time support, or even, these AI powered assistants.
Yeah, so just building on the Copilot piece, so, like, if you're running a learning program and you have Agent Builder enabled, what a very simple thing you could do is actually put your program materials onto a SharePoint site and build a Copilot agent that's an assistant that you could send out to learners as well. So it's kind of like you're sending them the materials maybe, like, through, email or a different site, but then if you have that knowledge assistant link, then they can quickly find information that they need about the program. And it's starting to get them to think, oh, like, it's very practical to use AI tools kind of in my own day to day. So that's one piece. I would say if you have that available, like that's becoming for us almost a kind of a no brainer for every single one of our programs. Or if you have, Enterprise GPT or Gemini Gems, you could do the same thing there. So like send a link in addition to um, in addition to the materials you're sending if you're sending in a traditional way. And then so that's one. Another piece is, I actually just wrote an article, shameless plug on AI enabled leadership development. So even if the experience is kind of more, in person or high touch, you can send out AI enabled content. So like, like a podcast made from your materials that you use in Notebook LM. So just as another modality for people, just that's just one example. Another thing that we're seeing is, pretty much any experience can now get clodified in the sense that you put the materials or the learnings into Claude, and then pretty much all of your slides can be interactive, and that just creates for a much stronger experience than just static slides, and you don't have to fiddle around with PowerPoint animations. You know? For example, like we were just doing a presentation to a client, it was just like a pitch to a client, and we were running some hypothetical scenarios about like, well, if you want this or this, it's gonna, be kind of more expensive or less expensive, et cetera. So we, instead of using a PowerPoint deck, we actually created the whole thing in Claude, where it's like an interactive app. And so part of the experience was kind of like a slide, but then when we got to the discussion about what needs they would have, we could actually hit certain buttons and have some levers that it would calculate in the background. I mean, now it wasn't so simple where it would actually give a price, but it would give sort of the, this is higher price, this is lower price. It created for a much, much richer experience than what we would normally do in like static slides. So that's something we do kind of across all of our client communications now, is like think about how do we make it interactive. And for all of your programs that currently use slides, I would highly encourage you to start experimenting with like creating a Claude app to kind of spice things up as well.
I love that. And I think that's such a great kind of thing that so many of our listeners can relate to, that they could use as a starting point to kind of start playing around with. Do you have any other things that you, or any other kind of like little things like that, that you would suggest for, for folks who are feeling kind of overwhelmed by all of these things? What could they start kind of playing around with? And are there ways that they can start, thinking about measuring the impact of trying some of these things or implementing some of these things?
The measuring impact, I'll start there because it's a maybe a simple answer in the sense that we are still figuring it out as an industry. What I'm seeing is like even for something as, I would say, standardized as Copilot adoption, or kind of the impact of Copilot, right? Pretty much everyone still is measuring the metrics of adoption. Like they're looking at a dashboard to see how many people logged in, et cetera, et cetera. We are still not quite at the point of having like a good way to measure the actual productivity, right? So right now it is still self-reported for the most part, where we ask, a cohort of people to say, okay, estimate how much time X process normally takes, and then get measure the same amount with an AI tool like Copilot. So it's interesting because you would think that there would be a better way of measuring right now, but we are still at kind of that like login kind of metrics at this point. So you have to get creative if you want like real productivity metrics out of it. Now, I would say on the cool factor, the engagement factor, I mean, you could definitely see, NPS scores. You can, think about the NPS scores, or just feedback from the session, right? Like that's going to make your scores go up if you know, literally, if you just have a deck that you've been using for a long time, like see what it looks like as a refreshed, if you have Claude Enterprise, like what it would look like in that format. So it would be like an interactive HTML file is the kind of the output so far. Although, hey, when this podcast comes out, it could be something else at that point, right? So um these things are changing quickly, but you can do similar things in Chat GPT Enterprise or Copilot, like even creating interesting images, right? Like I always say, if you're going to use like stock imagery, if your enterprise allows image creation, then like try to create the image for your audience. Like I always like to start off like if I'm doing a conference presentation, like me wearing the conference shirt, or me like something to do with the conference, right? And it's like, for example, I did a conference presentation in Mexico City, and for my opener video, I actually had I had taken pictures of like the pool and like the lobby area, etc. I actually had myself diving into the conference pool as like, hey, here's my intro. I've landed. So there's there's like so much stuff, and like especially with like AI video and imagery that you can do now that just adds that extra level of engagement that previously it would have been really hard to do before. And of course, understanding that many people are, you know, somewhat constrained with the enterprise tools available to them. I definitely want to acknowledge that. But at the same time, I'll say on a personal level, the train is moving. So if you are in a heavily, regulated or kind of like constrained organization, experiment with this stuff on your own, because once those tools do come to your organization, then you won't be caught flat-footed. You'll be able to pivot really, really quickly and be able to be kind of a lead user in that environment.
That actually brings me to my next kind of like topic set of questions that I wanted to talk about is what you mentioned there is like on the individual level, right? We've been talking a lot about like what organizations can do and how they can use these AI tools. But, in this same world where work and, the skills needed to do work are constantly shifting, how should individuals be thinking about their own growth and upskilling?
Yeah, no, that's a great kind of flow from the last topic, because I always say this might be a bold statement, especially kind of in the learning and talent space, but you know even though there's wonderful learning leaders working to create programs on AI adoption and readiness, you know the truth is those programs just currently are a little bit behind the market in terms of how things that are coming out, right? The features that are coming out. So I always say, like, no one's really gonna come and give you the silver bullet, right? Of figuring this all out, because I hear from a lot of people, well, I have Copilot, but I haven't gotten the training for it, or I have Enterprise GPT, but like I think they're working on some training, something like that. But it's like, no matter where you sit in the organization, like, it's important for you to kinda take charge of your own learning, even if you're building the learning, right, for the organization. Like, it's very important to experiment and try things outside of work. And, people say, "Well, gosh, I don't have enough time," right? So, 100%, uh, but it's almost like you you have to find creative ways of experimenting. There's a I When I talk to clients, like, we always kind of are sharing different, like, podcasts or recaps that we like to listen to at the end of the week. So, for example, my favorite is Matt Wolf on YouTube, who kind of he does a recap of everything that was released during the week, and he also does kind of like he actually tries it out. So it's not like you're just hearing about it, you're actually seeing what the results are in action, so that you don't have to, like, you know, get the account and, like, log in and all that stuff that takes forever. You don't have to do it yourself. So it's that kind of stuff, like, it doesn't have to be Matt Wolf, but, like, find somebody, like a newsletter or a podcast or a YouTube channel that does a weekly recap, and then take the time to, like, whether it's in the car. I actually, like to listen in the shower sometimes. Um, so, like, find creative places to listen, and then you can kind of that'll help you stay abreast of everything that's happening. And then once in a while, like, choose a tool and choose an actual thing that is related to something you're doing at work. Of course, don't use company data, all that kind of stuff, but choose something that will actually move the needle for you, even the thinking about it, and then experiment with that tool, and just go deep dive into that tool, and that'll help you stay on the edge as well. And then actually the last thing I'll say, most important actually, is get your team engaged, right? Like, run like some kind of like hackathon or a competition, or just share, like, start off meetings with, like, here's something cool that I learned, here's something interesting that I saw in the market. We just don't do that enough, I think. And myself, and my company, and my circles included, like, there's just always more that we could be doing in that space, because it's moving too quickly for one person to stay on top of it themselves. You have to have kind of a coalition, a team, to kind of help drive this forward for you.
I think that's so important. It's like, and it's what's kind of cool about it is like that's something at its core is like so basic and human, right? Is sharing, like sharing experience. And I think it's like that piece of it is becoming just as important as like learning the new tech or like experimenting with the new tech is like talking to people about how they're using the new tech is like almost like a parallel train that's running that we need to like keep talking with people about, because I think I know personally, like just as a working mom of young kids, like how I'm incorporating AI in like my day-to-day life for things. It's like other mom friends are like, oh, I use ChatGPT to do X, Y, and Z, or like, oh, I've used Claude to do help me like do X, Y, and Z. And now I'm doing that to help save time, because that's, as a busy mom, as every other busy mom can understand, is like that's what we're always looking to do, or we're needing to do to get some of our time back to spend time, with our kids and our family. So I think that's really good applicable advice across the board, not just for your career. So I really love that, Yulia. To close, what's one lesson that you've learned as an L&D leader that you wish you'd known earlier on in your career?
A big lesson is you actually can, with the speed of how things are moving, if you actually lean into learning, you can you can progress pretty rapidly, and you can become a SME pretty rapidly and get visibility in your own in kind of your area of the organization, or even more broadly across the organization. So, I mean, I was always kind of, you know, into learning, but it's just, to me, it's like, when I work with some of the people who've been in the space for a very long time, the data and AI space. A lot of times, like if they're so busy, they're not necessarily reading all the latest articles. Like I can actually help and partner with them on kind of shaping a client session or a client experience, even though I don't have the 30 years they do in that front. So it's kind of like things are moving so quickly that you can, like, within like 3 or 6 months, you can actually get effectively years of experience in a particular field that you can then partner with a SME on, and you can be a very, very powerful team. You can add much more value than you previously could without all of this uh, fast moving environment, and kind of the AI enabled learning that you personally can do now to get up to speed on different domains. So hopefully that can encourage everyone to really lean in and see how far you can take your career with whatever current experience you have, and then layering on top of that all of the AI knowledge and innovation that you can do now as well.
Absolutely. I think that that's something that's really amazing about this time that we're living in, right? There's now like opportunity to learn, like endless learning, right? Which is amazing. Yulia, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. It's been wonderful to discuss all of these different areas. If anyone wants to discuss more, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, and I sometimes share random learnings and innovations that I come across. So I would love to continue the discussion.
I love that. Absolutely. We'll link to your LinkedIn bio right on our webpage. So if our listeners are watching us there, you should see it there. If not, go over to NovoEDTalks podcast, and you'll be able to find Yulia's LinkedIn bio right there on her episode. And thank you to all of our listeners for tuning in to another episode.